Again, like it's by no means like a question. Like you keep falling short, and I still fall
and you
short.
know, one thing I'm realizing through this conversation, and even looking back in my life, how much it's important for us to get validation from other men. And I'm also realizing it's not only that, but when validation is given, for the most part, it's given for wrong things.
Yes.
And it's like, for example, like I remember, I always tell this story because it breaks my heart. Like the story you just told me, right? There was somebody in my group of friends back in college who hadn't had sex, right? And that was totally fine. So like, but I think the other guys just gave him a really hard time. And it was not like they were physically giving him a hard time, like, oh, what? But it's like when a joke was made all the time about something that had to do with sexual things, they were like, oh, you can't relate, bro, because you don't know this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no way you know about this.
And then think about how harmful that is, though, to someone.
It is harmful. And I'll tell you how. Hi, guys. Welcome back to Below the Surface, Conversations for Men by Men. My name is Kudakwashe Mushaike. I am your host. In this channel, we have conversations with men about their lives, the things that affect them, the challenges they're facing, but also their hopes and dreams for the future. And this week, I'll be talking to Pablo Ordonez. Pablo is a management consultant at Accenture and is also a writer from Miami, Florida. Thanks for coming to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I think I just want to get right into it. Because you said when I asked you how you're feeling when you came, you said you're feeling reflective. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to know some of the things that you were reflecting about.
So I guess I'm thinking a lot about your question about how, you know, like what are the things that have shaped me into becoming a man?
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about my father and the way that like kind of our fathers become this first introduction into like what a man should be, right? Like your father is for most of your life your primary man. Mm-hmm. And that comes with a lot of really important lessons, you know, and good lessons, but also like things that as a man you want to unlearn too, right? I think a lot about generational definitions of manhood and manliness and machismo, and so I feel like when I think about my own evolution as a man, I think a lot about just being very much defined at the beginning by my father, and then slowly like understanding like what qualities that I wanted to keep as a man, like what would make me a sort of man that I could feel like really proud of, and what qualities I kind of wanted to no longer reproduce or recreate, right? And so it's like about, again, these cycles of intergenerational trauma and these cycles of intergenerational behaviors that you have to be very intent and very willful in breaking if you do want to be different, and if you do want to be a man that you want to be.
And so what are some of those things you felt that you had to be like, I don't want to be this? And how was that process to get into that place where you're like, actually, I don't want to be this thing that I learned or that I saw growing up?
I think, I guess like inherently it just becomes a question of being a man in relationship to women, right? Like I think obviously like we exist beyond like a gender binary, and you know, think more about spectrums and a lot of those really important like kind of shifts in the way we think, but very much fundamentally I think, especially like growing up, there's a very clear dichotomy in how you build a relationship between who identifies as men and who identifies as women, right? And I think a lot of the behaviors as to, you know, what a man is expected to do, or what a man should be, or what makes you a man and what makes you not a man, or what makes you less of a man, whether that's kind of punished, or that's kind of I guess it's kind of how you get told off, right? Is that you're either not really a man, right? Or you're all of a sudden attracted to men, as if that were something that would make you weaker or less. That all of a sudden that you don't have what it takes, you know, like you're not as strong. Like there's like an inherent like physical weakness to not embodying those same traits.
So do you feel like those things were applied to your situation, like you were being told that you're not being man enough, or what?
I don't know if my dad ever made me like. I don't know if my dad ever said that straightforward, because it's not even about like saying it's like it's almost about a game of expectations, right? And like a sort of implied weakness if you don't meet certain criteria. And the thing is, it's not even like necessarily like, I mean, it's in the context of like a one-on-one relationship with your dad, right?
Yeah.
But it's also like just in relationship with the world, right? I mean, I feel like it's like you you're given a set of rules, right, of what a man is, or how a man behaves, or at the very least how your dad behaves, right? And you want to be like your dad, and then you're presented with all these social situations that let you react to things as a man, right? And you either prescribe to those rules or you don't.
So at what point did you realize like you were carrying some things you didn't want? Was that in college? Because I understand you had a lot of like thinking and growing that you did after your relationship with your ex.
Yeah. I think I definitely had them most strongly in college, right? Because I was in an environment of people who were just really, really different than me, right? I mean, it was just people who were came from all sorts of different backgrounds, had all sorts of different beliefs, and who for most of my life I spent time around like brown people. And so like brown people from like Miami, right? And so you have like South American people, you have Caribbean
Puerto
people,
Ricans.
Puerto Ricans, Cubans, many Cubans, and so a lot of the ideas of what it meant to be a man were pretty consistent, I think, around all these different communities and all these different other parental figures, right, or manly figures that were in my life. So I guess being in Claremont just really gave me an opportunity to be very removed from that, and to really engage with people who had radically different notions of what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be a person, like what does it mean to care for other people. I mean, I guess
how that looked like. That's the funny thing, because but it's weird for me to hear that from you, because I thought coming in, because I was coming from Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Because I thought struggling with that, because I struggle with that a lot too. I thought it was maybe because I was from Zimbabwe and I was coming from a completely different context. But it seems like if it was you coming from Miami, you had a different. Yeah. So for me, I remember vividly like communication, especially interactions with women, were really different. And I think at one point people were like, I was hearing some people saying, oh, you're being aggressive. And I was like, what do you mean I'm being aggressive? Because like me speaking the way that I speak, coming from Zimbabwe, is completely normal. It's the way that you talk to women. For example, like if you ask somebody out on a date or whatever, it's like if they don't get back to you in America, like in the context of Claremont at least, it meant that they're just not interested, and you don't have to ask again.
Right.
But back home, it's like it was normal to just be like, you actually expected to pursue over a long period of time a girl you're interested in. And it's almost like that's what you expected to do if you're really interested. Like you send another message, or you just show up and ask why they didn't reply your message, or like when you're going to get to hang out with them or whatever. That's normal, right? It's like part of how you pursue back home. And like you can never expect that someone will just say yes to you right off the bat, that they like you too. It's like, even though you know that somebody liked you, they won't tell you right off the bat, because like women back home are conditioned that showing that
interest is wrong, right?
Showing interest is wrong, especially showing interest right off the bat. But flip that's Claremont, right? Like it's like, if somebody, like you meet somebody and then they don't respond, or they don't show interest right off the bat, it just means they're not interested.
Right.
And so for me, it was just like, I had to actually learn that the hard way of like being in a situation where it was like, yo, you shouldn't have asked one more time. You shouldn't have, like if they didn't respond, you shouldn't reach out again.
But I guess I'll say that I think the way, and I guess in a lot of ways, Claremont was just very, it was a lot of preparation for like the way our world is moving altogether, right? Because I mean, the reality is that like a lot of the things we experienced in Claremont were not how they're experienced elsewhere, right? They weren't how they're experienced in Miami, right? And that's like 3,000 miles away in the same country. Very different, right? I grew up with very, very different people than radically different, right? For you, like in a whole different continent, like that's radically different. Really different. But ultimately, like ways that like the ways that the world is moving to anyway. So it's like I guess I was okay with unlearning that behavior, or I guess at some point I just realized that the behavior that the way it was before wasn't okay. And the thing is, it's not even like it's not even a question of I guess like whether that behavior is right or wrong, but even within like the context of the United States itself, right? Like I mean, when you go to like a club, right, you're supposed to like aggressively pursue like that, like that's the sort of norm, you know, like from a Latin American perspective for how men should behave. You're supposed to be more, you know, aggressive when you're at a club, right? You just I mean, even today, right? I mean, I think it's less now than it certainly was previously, but even today, there's a sort of expectation that you would just, you know, begin grinding on some,
on a girl,
on a woman, and then if she wasn't interested, she would push you away. But if you think about just how much like pressure that puts on someone else, like gosh, like someone more physically imposed, like I mean, there's all sorts of things that are wrong with that, right? Yeah. But so I guess I had a chance to really engage with those questions in Claremont. Yeah. And ultimately, like again, like we were saying at the beginning, like figuring out the things that made me a better man, or that made me feel like I was being more of a man, more of the type of man that I wanted to be.
You wanted to be. Yeah. For me, it was really interesting what you just said, because I remember even when I was in Claremont, because I got to a point where I started normalizing, like for example, when you go to a party, I mean, it's good. It's good, right? It's a good thing. I mean, depending on how you see it, where I started normalizing, like, for example, that you would ask somebody to dance, and then progressively got to a point where you're dancing close to each other or whatever, right? And then, but then there came a point where I went for a trip to Atlanta for school, and we went to a club, and I remember we were just dancing in a club. It was a lot of black people in the club, and I remember like I think I was with Arrow and all these other guys from school. They're also black. They were having a good time. And it wasn't in Atlanta. It was in Pomona. We went to a party at Pomona. I think one of these guys were affiliated with fraternity. Do you call it a fraternity if it's for men? It's fraternity, right?
That's the one.
Sorry, I don't know the difference between the sorority and fraternities because we didn't go to a school that did that, so I didn't quite understand it. But anyways, we're out there dancing, and then I wasn't getting anybody to dance with me, right? Because I was going asking people to dance, and like all these black women would just look at me weird, like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, and then I saw everybody was just literally, you just like pull somebody. Like literally there was this guy who was just sitting there and just like pull somebody to sit on them, and then they would dance, and that was normal. That was normal in the space of the people that were in the room, how the people looked like, their background, and what they understood as normal, right? Yeah. And at that time, that's when I realized, oh shoot, like what's happening in school is not what's happening in America. And it's not, cause like to me, you must understand, I was coming from Zimbabwe, right? I'd never been in a room with Americans. So what I saw at Pomona was like, okay, this is what America looks like. And this is how I ought to be as a man in America. Yeah. But then that was challenged when I moved outside, just literally moved outside the college, because Pomona is right next to the college, right? Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like Pomona, the city, is right next to the Pomona College. Like it was just weird for me to, be in that space and have that challenge, and just completely hit me. I think that's when I also started going through the process of being like, okay, so I know this from where I'm from, this is the worldview I've carried all my life of how I have to move through space. And I know this Pomona worldview where like I'm being told to be this way, or that the way that I've been all my life is wrong. And having to be in that space where I have to question and like put these things on a scale was incredibly difficult, I think, for me. At one point, I didn't want to be at Pomona because of that.
Yeah, and I think as men, right, I think it's like a sort of level of I don't want to say the word privilege, but it's just like this, like, I guess, entitlement.
Yeah. You think it's entitlement? Why do you say
a little bit? I mean, like...
what do you think is entitlement?
I think that the entitlement comes from the fact that women just don't have to women don't get a choice on whether to deal with these questions, right? Meaning that for women, like, many times, I think especially, is like we break stigmas of, like, being able to, like, share that you're raped, right? That you were raped. Yeah. Or that you were sexually assaulted, like, it's very, very tangible for women, like these relationships, right? For you or for me, it's like, are we, successfully flirting or whatever? But for a woman, it's like, am I going to meet this guy? Is he going to be aggressive? And then am I like, I'm going to be in a room alone with this person who's stronger than me. Like, am I going to be safe? Right. So it's like we deal.
It's like questions we don't even have to ask.
Right. Exactly. Ourselves. Right. Exactly. They're just the stakes are significantly significantly different.
Yeah.
And so because the skills are so different, I think it just takes a lot. Like you got if once you realize that the skills are so different, you realize just how entitled you're being to like wanting to be comfortable and not being okay with that uncomfortableness. Yeah. Because that uncomfortableness is a result of essentially, like you're saying, like figuring out that your behavior, the way you've been taught, the way you've been socialized, is wrong, and you need to change.
But I wish it came like as an objective question.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it makes you question who you are. Like you can imagine how I had to question.
Sure.
Because all my life I thought like I'm a good man. Like of course like I'm always considerate of women. Like, I grew up in a family where I was the only guy, so I was always compassionate to women's issues. So when somebody questioned me on that, on being like, "Oh, you're kind of aggressive," I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like it was like, "Are you attacking like me, my character? Yeah. Are you saying like I'm not?" So like, but most of the time it comes off as a conversation about your character, rather than a conversation of.
Think about though, like how deeply intertwined your own like masculinity is to who you think you are. Yeah. Right. And so it's like that's what makes it so difficult, and I think makes it so difficult to actually like change men's minds like in a broader scale. Yeah. Is that it's just so deeply intertwined with who you are. So an attack on your masculinity is an attack on you.
Yeah, it's not as opposed to masculinity, because it was, if we could find a way, and I think that's the difficult thing, and maybe that's where older men are failing us, or like society in essence is failing us, of teaching us to separate, like you're saying, your masculinity from your sense of self, so that we can progressively deal with these issues where you're like, okay, the way that men in general are acting in society is affecting women, or is getting them into a place where they're having to worry about these things more. So let's move it such that men see things in this particular way. But I struggle finding a way that can be done without also negatively knocking at men's doors and their masculinity, but kind of creating a place for conversation between men and women that we can reach an agreement of what is good society. I don't know if that's even possible.
Well, I guess I don't see why women need to be involved in that conversation in the first place, right? Because women have told you everything that you need to know about how they feel, about the way that they engage with men in the world, right? And like if you really wanted to know challenges, and you wanted to understand like that, there's so much that's been written on that, right? So it's like different levels of like entitlement, like but that's what you're saying makes it so hard, right?
It makes it so hard
because it's hard to convince men on a broad scale to do that self-reflection and to quote unquote do that work, because it's work, right? It's
work. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of, like you're saying, it's a lot of reflective work where you're having to challenge some of the perceptions you hold personally,
right?
And for most of us, we don't want to let go of that hold we have, because it's so like intertwined, like you said, to who we are. Like, for example, for me, it was hard understanding why all of a sudden, all my life, I thought like, oh, you just need to, be engaged in the conversation of like, oh, do you want to go out? Do you like me? Whatever. It was like, you just have to like ask once and then head out. To me, that was really weird, because it's fundamentally how I grew up.
Yeah. But, I will say, I think there's definitely levels, and like that's not necessarily the answer, right? It's like the whole like ask one and done, but it's like overall we just need to get at a place where we're just better and more comfortable communicating and having difficult conversations, and that goes for men and for women, right?
And that goes for men and for women. I was gonna say that too. Yeah, I think because women also fail us if they, instead of like communicating, oh, I feel really uncomfortable with this situation, if that is not communicated, it can only cause harm, right? Because it's like, if the way that I'm behaving is not, if I don't get feedback immediately, because feedback only works if it's immediate feedback as well, where you're like, oh, but the way that you say this came off kind of wrong. Yeah. But I also it becomes a responsibility thing as well, as you were saying, because I feel like most of the times women have to have this responsibility of constantly thinking like, am I comfortable with this? Am I comfortable with this? And we're not doing enough work.
And then to have to communicate that, then put yourself out there and risk again some response from men who you don't know how they're going to respond.
Yeah, how they're going to respond. Yeah.
So it's I think though, like, sorry. On the whole, like there's a lot of challenge, I think, with like just the way the internet has begun to shape the way we engage as men and women. And that's like this is our transition into a different topic. But like ghosting, for instance. And the way that I guess you were talking about this, like kind of talk to someone once if if they're not interested. Yeah. It's like we don't really create space for those conversations, and the internet has facilitated not having to create that space because now you don't really have to see anyone in person. Yeah. So if you're not interested in something, you don't have to reply.
If you're not happy with what they did, you just peace out.
Yeah, you just peace out.
Which is wrong in so many ways because there's no learning happening, right? There's no learning to say, okay, for example, you need that feedback, right? To be like, oh, look, what you did at that point, it made me so uncomfortable that I want to peace out. I don't want to ever see you again. I don't want to have this conversation. It was this particular conversation at this particular moment that I didn't feel too good about.
Yeah, and I think those sucks because
conversations are necessary for growth.
But that's responsibility, and like that puts an onus on women, and that sucks. But the fact of the matter is that there's just no That's like the most.
But if we don't have this conversation either, we're not gonna grow as a people.
Right. Totally. Exactly. Yeah. So it's like two parts. On one hand, like obviously you don't have any, like no one should be putting this responsibility on you. You have every right to peace out and move on. Yeah. But then on the other hand, it's like how else are we also gonna begin doing the work of like changing minds and actually do the work of getting people to reconsider their perspectives without that conversation. Yeah. That being said, though, there's plenty of women that I know who have this sort of engagement, right? Like with like a man, and they'll tell them, this is what made me uncomfortable, and then they'll get like death threats, or they'll get like just general like nasty feedback or comments, and so it's like a dangerous game, and it's still a lot that we're asking women to do. And so the question I think becomes like, as men, right, and as men who understand, all right, and who have a lot of work to do still, right? Yeah, a lot. How do we begin engaging a broader audience of men to have those moments of self-reflection, which are inherently uncomfortable and are inherently, work? And I think we come back to this question of like, oh, everyone has sisters and everyone has mothers, but that's like bullshit, right? Like it's like women aren't valuable just because we have women in our lives. They're just valuable because they're beings. And so doing that kind of work and creating those spaces of conversation, needs to happen, and I think this is like a great way to do it.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, I feel like that's why it's necessary for this, because I feel like, unlike women, because I feel for a lot of women have aunties and friends and groups of friends. I see my girlfriend; she talks all the time to her friends about everything that she's going through. For me, it's like that doesn't really happen much, and for my friends that I see, it doesn't really happen much either. Where you have a group of people that are advising you and helping you in the process of growing and getting better, right? And I think it's like, for men, it's like, because we don't have much of this, we get stuck in our little corner of growth where we're not getting any insight from other men to be like, okay, this is what you ought to do. And I think
we're getting bad advice.
Getting bad advice. And I think it's bad advice coupled with that, It's like, so how was that process for you coming to a place with all these things considered, where you were like, okay, this is who I want to be? How was that whole process? And like, how did you get to that place? Because like, very few people get there. I feel like a lot of people give up because it's a lot. It's a lot of like looking within. It's a lot of looking at the moves you've done so far and being self-critical, but also having the self-compassion to be like, okay, this happened. I did this, I did that, but that's not who I am. It's how I was taught to be.
I guess at some point you just become so ashamed of yourself.
Yeah. Whoa, man.
Well, I mean, like it's not like necessarily deep shame, right? Or like a deep. But it's like you think about like those behaviors that you've normalized, right? Like thinking about like approaching a woman at a club, right, and just beginning to grind on a woman, right? And again, that's all within a certain context of like how you've been socialized. That's all like okay, right? You go to Atlanta, you go to like a club, people are doing it, you think it's okay. But when you really sit back and you're like, like holy shit, like I just like asserted myself on a woman, like someone who did not invite me to assert. Like how would I feel if someone like it came behind me and just began, pressing their like groin against my ass, like you like that's like shameful, like the idea of me doing that, or like that's like embarrassing. That's like not you get me, like it's like you got to really like put yourself in empathy.
Pablo, I think you're minimizing the amount of empathy it takes for you to be in that place either, because I think if it was that easy, everybody would be empathetic like that, but it's not. because if all these men are telling you and they're shouting, go Pablo in the room, and they're saying that's the right thing to do. That's
true. That's very fair.
You have to do a little more work to be like, okay, actually, I want to be the fish that's like going opposite the wave, you know? So like, I don't think you should minimize that, because that already takes a lot of work to be like, okay, Pablo, that was crazy, man. Why were you just grinding on someone you don't know? To get to that place, bro, it's a lot of empathy.
Yeah. No, and again, I think you're right. It's like, I'm definitely minimizing the effect of like spheres of influence, right? Because if you have like a bunch of bros who are guiding you to do the same, you know, it's actually interesting. The other day, I was visiting my girlfriend's friends in LA. Yeah. And one of her friends, one of these dudes, he was talking about how he didn't want to be the first one in his friend group to be married. And I guess on one level, like, you get it, right? It's like, makes sense, you know, there's like a certain level of like maturity and growing up and like being tied down, and we have all these weird, you know, social expectations and customs. But on the other hand, it's like where does that sentiment come from, right? Like what holds that sentiment up? Like what to me as a man, right? Or to him says the pressure and validation of your male friends is so strong that if you do this, then you are not doing well within the eyes of these men whose validation you need, right? That's to the point that would stop you from pursuing the thing that you actually want to do, right? And that's insane. But that's what it is, right? At the end, like, and that's why, again, like, creating circles of like men who are willing to like we'll just need to be the blackfish, right? Or whatever. We'll need to be the black sheep. We'll need to like
to be the few one of
uncomfortable. We'll need to create uncomfortable spaces within men and the groups of men that we know, and say, no, I don't think that's okay. Like, why are we
doing it? Why are we this is okay?
Exactly. Like, why are we like? And it's hard, right? But it's the same responsibility that you're asking women to put on themselves when we think about, like, you know, like, more communication. Same deal, right? It's like we have a responsibility as dudes and as men
to be like, before women have to say this is not okay, have we
checked the men in our lives to make sure that they're doing that work,
so that we don't even have to get to the point where they have to say it's not okay,
right? Totally. Yeah, but again, that's very hard, and
I saw that too.
Also, I think I would say, like, getting to the point where I have today, it's very, very, very unfair to say that I've done that all myself. Like, I've just had really, really wonderful, caring, compassionate women in my life who have been willing to put in the work for me, to check me, and to tell me, you know, help me understand where I'm falling short. Yeah. Like, I feel like this has been very me oriented, which is fair. I mean, obviously a lot of empathy, a lot of work, but also, like, just women who have taken the time, who have put in the work, who have put me in uncomfortable situations, and who have been okay with putting me in those uncomfortable situations to say, this is your behavior. This is why it's not right. Okay. You need to figure out how you're going to make this behavior better because it's not right. You need to understand why it's not right.
You need that mirror. You need, exactly. I like that you said that, because looking back in my life, I can tell even in college, there were like one or two women that were really compassionate in doing that work, and be like, okay, because I think sometimes it doesn't come from a place of malice for men, for most men, at least that I know, and myself having involved in, you know, in areas where I was not, you know, doing well, right? It's like, you need those people to help you see it, because sometimes it's not because you're a bad person, it's just because you, like we were saying, you just don't know, and you just have a different understanding of how things go, right? And then once you know, you're like, oh shit, I see what you're talking about. That makes sense, you know? Let me shift a little bit. And now I understand my impact. Because sometimes we live in, like, our lives, we live in our own movie of where things make sense to us. But sometimes the things that make sense to us may not necessarily make sense to the other person. Right. Because we're so in line with everything that's happening in our life and everything we're thinking. But the impact we may be having on someone can be completely different, right? And wow, man, that's cool. So it had to take a little bit of, like, being ashamed.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you got to get to the point where the behaviors that you're at least, like, replicating, or the behaviors that you're seeing around you are no longer acceptable. Yeah. And are they okay? Yeah. Right? Or what we're doing that's not okay, and what should be done. Yeah. It's just miles apart.
It's just miles apart.
Like, it's a complete re-understanding of masculinity. It's a complete re-understanding of like personal space.
Yeah.
It's a complete re-understanding of just social relationships, of friendship, like it's a re-understanding of all these different dimensions. And again, like it's by no means like a question, like you keep falling short. And I still fall short.
You know, one thing I'm realizing through this conversation, and even looking back in my life, how much it's important for us to get validation from other men. And I'm also realizing it's not only that, but when validation is given, for the most part, it's given for wrong things.
Yes.
And it's like, for example, like I remember, I always tell this story because it breaks my heart. Like the story you just told me, right? There was somebody in my group of friends back in college who hadn't had sex, right? And that was totally fine. So like, but I think the other guys just gave him a really hard time. And it was not like they were physically giving him a hard time, like, oh, what? But it's like when a joke was made all the time about something that had to do with sexual things, they were like, oh, you can't relate, bro, because you don't know this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no way you know about this. And
then think about how harmful that is, though, to someone.
It is harmful. And I'll tell you how, because at a certain point, this dude ended up having sex with somebody we didn't care about at all, only to come back to the table and tell us, and everybody in the table be like, yo, bro, why did you do that? Like, why you like, and it's like now flipped on him. But these are the same people who are just being like funny about him, not having had sex before. It's just like, these are the same people that he was looking for validation. He comes back to the table, he gets completely the opposite thing. Yeah. And I feel like I felt that so many times in my life where I feel like men in my circle failed me, of being like, when I'm coming for validation, it's like they give you the opposite. And so you don't even know sometimes like what it is that you should be doing or where you should be to find that validation.
I'll tell you what the valation is always. And you tell me if I'm wrong. But I think the validation always has to do with how well you have objectified a woman. Like it's always like, did you have sex with her? Did you do something that was that maybe she wasn't into, right? Or maybe like you convinced her to do something that she wasn't into at first.
Or you convinced a couple other women to do the same thing.
Or you've done it with a number of women, right? Like you have a body count, like a large. So it's like always about like how well you've objectified women, and that's what as men you like cheer for, or you like that gains you respect.
If you come back and be like, oh guys, I just had a really good date with a woman. It's like, what, bro?
We didn't have sex. Yeah, we didn't have sex. I just walked in her.
And that was me all the time, right? And it's like it got to a point where people were like, yo, people, and I struggle with this because I was like, I would always come with a different story to the table and people would question me. And sometimes it's not only that. It's not because I was coming with a different story. Sometimes I was just coming with like, guys, let's talk about, have real conversation. Right? And everybody would be like, bro, what are you talking about, bro? Now you're trying to get emotional. Oh, bro, like, why? Because to me, it was always a problem because on the table, it's like, especially with my African friends, man, like, you end up just being like, somebody's going to be made fun of every single time, bro. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I started realizing that this made people self-conscious. And of course it made people self-conscious, because if someone makes fun of you that, oh, you have, your hairline is all the way back here and it's the same joke all the time, you're not going to want to, have your hairline out all the time. I have a friend who, since freshman year, bro, in that group, never took out their cap. You probably know the guy, but I'm not going to say it. But there was someone in the group until his like senior year. That's the first time he took off his hat, because everybody always made fun of his hairline. So you can tell that if somebody has to change behavior to that point, it's clearly affecting them.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I feel like that was probably one of the things that I definitely wanted to change in my own growing up. Like my household is very much like, you make fun of each other like a lot. Yeah. And you don't always just make fun of like innocuous things. You make fun of things that just deeply impact people. Like making fun of someone's hairline, right? Or making fun of someone's like teeth. Like just like things that are not a celebration of us as we are, but instead are just like digs meant to, I don't know, like bring us, like they don't really, like when I think back on them, like they don't make sense to me, right? Yeah, absolutely. Like I don't see what the joke is anymore, right? Because I guess, again, maybe it's that empathy or whatever, but it's like, what am I doing? Except
I'm starting to feel emotional just thinking about this. I have a lot that happened, and even in my growing up too, where like, people just make fun, and friends, and thinking about all these things that happen. And part of me that I had to kind of hide and change because of that, it's like, it's weird.
I mean, I think a lot of the times, like when I think about being a father myself, like that's like one of those things that I'm like, that's a behavior I want to stop, right? Like there's just like such a deep, again, like tradition or like a deep continuous behavior or like intergenerational behavior that you have to, again, once again, you have to be like very intentional about stopping. And that's definitely one of those things.
That's one of those
we got to build people up. We can't turn them down.
So where you finding the good now? Now that you dealt with some of the, you can never deal with everything. So now that you dealt with some of that and hopefully most of it, where are you finding the good stuff to feed yourself with? So you're not replicating some of those things.
I think for better or for worse, part of what I've done is just not engage with men whose behavior I don't like, right? Like it's like it sucks because it's like on one hand I have like a duty, right, to be in those spaces and to like engage with men who aren't doing that well and be that voice to dissent and put myself in that uncomfortable. But on the other hand, like I don't want to put myself in those spaces, right? Because that's not how that doesn't make me feel good, right? Yeah. And so like the male friends, right? It doesn't grow me, and all the male friends I have, are people that I deeply, deeply like respect and with whom I have like a very clear and deep understanding of like how we should be engaging with women. Men who I know are going to check me, who are going to be comfortable when I have to check them. Like those are the men that I keep around in my life, really. And so it's like if the men who want to be in my life, who aren't like with it, right? Like they like I have no problem checking them too, right? And if they don't want to be around me because I'm checking them or because I'm like making them uncomfortable if I don't agree with some behavior, or if I call them out or whatever it might be. It's not always about calling out. Right? It's just about like being a presence that believes differently. Then they're just not in my life, right? And that's that. And so it's like I guess that's.
But coming to that place, because going back to what I said about validation, coming to a place where you don't need validation anymore, and you're calling out those behaviors is really difficult. Isn't it? Yeah,
and I'm not like I think we all need validation from other people, right? I just think I think you definitely do have to stop caring about being validated for objectifying women.
Yeah,
like that.
And like, find something else.
Yeah,
that you can
find something else that needs to validate you, like shit. Like,
but it's still
plenty of things. How well you play guitar, how fast you run, shit. Like, there's tons of things you get validated for.
Is though, you're still not gonna get that validation either for most of these men groups. Like people still. Even people that know that you're a good football player are still gonna validate. They're only gonna validate you if you disrespect a woman.
And so like, it's everything, man. Like that's the thing. We've been talking about like women and object, but it's like in male friend groups. Validation is very, very what's the word? Rationed.
It's very
you have a very small amount of validation that you're willing to give out. And so it's like we should just be. I don't know what it is, man.
And it can be okay. It's funny because I was literally talking to Dominic yesterday. Dominic was like, "Oh, bro, you're growing big, or whatever."
You're what?
He was like, "Oh, you look big, like you look good."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, bro,
you do look good."
Yeah, thanks, man. And I was like, "Yo, bro, why you never say this?" He's like, "Good. Like, why you never say this when there are people around?" He's like, "Oh, because people are gonna think that I like you." And I was like, "What's wrong with you liking me? You're my friend."
Dude,
to me, that was a moment of realization. Like, oh shit, like. Even when we just happen to have more than 2 men in a room, it's a completely different thing. And like that validation is never going to come.
I practice telling my male friends that I love them. Like, I do that like a lot on purpose.
I've noticed,
because you have to be very like the subconscious behavior. You have to like constantly like pick at it. You get me, dude?
Yeah.
That makes like a lot of, it's like that and other small things that make the big things happen.
And it's hard to get to that place because like it's like I feel like there's so many attachments to what it means to be a man, especially in the Western worldview, right? It's like you can tell another man you love them. You can't tell them like it's like even in the African, bro, like no man in Africa is ever gonna tell you they love you, even if they're a friend.
Yeah.
To be honest, and I'm kind of wrong for this too. It's only my white friends that I tell I love them. Like I tell Asha I love her. I could never tell that to my African friends. They'll be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
If I were to do that, I would probably just say, "I love you, bro," and I have to put that "bro" at the end, like, or to put that like extra, like.
You know what that means? That means no homo.
I wanted to also ask you about. So, who is Pablo now?
That's a great question. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. I think I'm just trying to be more comfortable not knowing. And that is really hard.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I guess I could tell you who I am, right? Like, I mean, I guess it's easy to paint a sort of narrative about yourself.
Yeah.
And to pick things out here and there to create some sort of image of how you want to be represented. But I guess I'm a lot more invested in figuring out who I actually am as opposed to
who you want people to think you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really hard because we are defined by marketing. We're defined by social expectations. We're defined by how we see people, like famous people or celebrities behave. So I think we just constantly have that internal battle, right? So I think I'm now Pablo is just someone who's trying to deconstruct those things that have been implanted onto me, at the same time constructing the behaviors that I want to keep around, and that's really hard.
Okay.
But it's I think it's a really important work to find what's going to bring me peace. Like I think that's what I'm most invested in now.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Alyssa about it yesterday. Just like for me, like what I want is peace. Like I want to be able to just feel like content.
Yeah.
I want to feel content.
Yeah.
And I haven't figured out the way to get there yet. And it's because all of the avenues that society has taught us are the way to happiness are not really.
Yeah, they're not.
They're not. Like
they're just not.
Making more money is not going to.
It's not back to that validation thing. Most of the things that guys will validate you on, they're never going to bring you peace. I can bet you 100%.
Right. And so like making more money, being extremely wealthy, there are many, many people who are extremely wealthy who are deeply unhappy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Being with many women is not gonna make me happy.
Yeah.
So it's like a question of figuring out the things that like you've been told are gonna make you happy. Like fame is not gonna make me happy.
Yeah.
And then actually figuring out what's gonna bring me peace and contentment.
I realized now that you say that last time we talked, you said you were really unhappy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last time we had that brunch, if you remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, in San Francisco when I wrote out.
Yeah. And, so, and again, I think it was a result of all of coming to terms with all of the expectations.
Yeah.
And all of, I guess, the things that I thought I would be able to get done. And then like the very real barriers that just societally are meant to prevent me from getting the things that I want done. Meaning that like we were talking earlier, like I want to be able to like buy my own house and like my own space, I want to be able to like grow my own things. Like I want to be able to have like that, like I said, that peace. And the way that like things are set up, they're not like conducive to that at all. They're conducive to you buying an overpriced house and getting a 30-year mortgage and being committed to, dropping like $4,000 every month on this rent or on this mortgage for 30 years, and like work the same job that you don't want to work because it makes you miserable, and do all these things and be part of this machine and cog just for the sake of keeping the machine and cog going, which again, the purpose of which is to just make more money, right? Because at the end of the day, like if you divide, like I guess, if you divide America between like the people who own the wealth and the people who work to create more wealth, like there's no, like at the end of the day, all the work that I put in my job, right, does not come back to me. I mean, it does in a very small way, but at the end of the day, I don't really see the big fruits of all the labor that I'm putting in. The shareholders do, right?
That's true, yeah.
So like at the end of the day, like I'm just working for a paycheck so that I can afford to live, right? For basic necessities, right? To be able to pay my rent, be able to pay for my car, and then be able to save like a small amount. But like at the end of the day,
you felt like you were cogging the machine, just trying to make money.
Well, it's not that I feel like I am. Like, dude, you are too. Like we all slaves, like Kanye's right.
Yeah. No, but at least Kanye has all these houses. He's nothing.
No. Yeah. But like at the end, like we're slaves to money. We're slaves to like people's perceptions. Like I just want to remove myself from all. And I think this is the conclusion that all like smart people get to, like at the end of the day, like, or people who like want to like, who are working very, very diligently to find happiness. Yeah. Is that to really like find that happiness and to live life on your own terms. Yeah. You need to find ways to break out of that system. And that's why I guess money,
break out of that system.
For one is money, right? Like if I can afford my own house, like I don't need to be a billionaire. I just need enough money to be able to pay for my fucking house and be able to not have to worry about money and not let that be a deciding factor that fundamentally decides like what I do with my time in my life, right? Because if I asked you today, or I asked me today, if I did not have to worry about money, if I did not care about a paycheck, would I do the same work that I'm doing today?
Probably not.
No, for a fact, no, not. And I that's not to say that I know what I would be doing, but it's definitely not what the fuck I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Right? It's definitely not like sitting in front of a computer all day.
And it's even worse coupled with doing the work that you don't enjoy. So what do we do? And I think maybe that's the question that got you depressed.
I'm saying peace, dude. That's my solution today.
What do we do?
Saying peace. Nah, dude. It's like we fundamentally like the reality is that like I'm not a huge Bernie Sanders fan.
Yeah.
Personally, but the reality is that if we want a different world, like we have to radically change the rules of the game. Like we just radically have to change the way that we do things, and we have to radically. Like it's not going to be perfect, but if we don't want to play, like if I don't want to have to worry about my healthcare and like worry that if I lose my job I can't afford my home, or if I lose my job I can't like pay for food, then nothing's going to change. It's
when I didn't have like I told you, I was in between jobs for the past 4 or 5 months. I realized how things can easily go downhill in America. I never understood why we see a lot of homeless people on the roads. To me, that used to be a really disconnected thing from reality. But once I was in a situation where I was like, I'm not making any money anymore. I'm not making any money every week like I used to. Mm-hmm. Life looked completely different and quite bleak, to be honest. And I was like, if I make one mistake, I'm out. Like if I don't have to have a job for a year, that's it. Like I have to go back home.
Well, think about how it's
so easy to
think about the things though that we've accepted though, like, as normal. Like we accept homelessness as normal. That's honestly my biggest, like single-handedly the biggest issue in the Bay that I think needs to be addressed. And like where I put like my thoughts and energy in is homelessness. Like it makes like we there's a line, right? Societally, we've all agreed on the line of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, and we decided that homelessness and people not having homes and having to shit on the streets was within the normal parameters. Even as Jeff Bezos has $100 and something billion, it's honestly like Donald Trump and all these things. Like it all makes sense because everything is upside down in this world, and we pretend that it's not, but everything is upside down. Like the fact that a man has $102 billion, like an insane, like if he wanted to buy he could not spend that much money even if he wanted to, and it's just sitting in his bank account, like making more money, increasing in assets. Homelessness cannot be that difficult to solve, right? Like you're saying, like all the talent for all these problems is at Facebook trying to fucking figure out how to sell more ads, or like at Google, like trying to figure out how to like get people to sell more ads. It's that's where the top talent in our world is. And that's what they're doing. Even
if you go to Facebook, like the company I was working at, right? It's like the good people in that company too are in those teams. Like they serve, like Google search is example. Google is one of the most admired teams. Like everybody wants to be there because they know that that's where they're gonna sell a lot of money. That's where most of the money is. And those teams are treated way different than all the other teams. Like even where I was working, like there were teams where everybody wants to work for because that's the team that's making the most money for the company. And guess what? What teams are making more money for the company? The teams that are increasing engagement, the teams that are increasing ads, the teams that where everybody's customer facing.
So what does that say about the priorities of a company? And I think the word company though, like if we get away from it for a second, like ultimately what we're talking about is an organization of people aligning and working together to achieve a goal. What does that say about what your real goal is? If your stated goal is to connect people, right? Or to make all information accessible, or whatever you want to call your goal. What does it say about that, about your actual goal? When nothing in your company, nothing in the way people are actually aligned, actually works to achieve that goal. Like the stated goal and the actual goal are miles apart. And they spout all this bullshit about like what they're doing, and it's all PR. It's all like, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg goes to Congress and talks about all this stuff, and now they're doing all this like COVID-19 stuff. But it's like that's not what's happening on the ground right now. It's insane and it's angry.
And so again, we need radical. But then when it translates to how our lives are, like you're saying, we hold really good jobs in the Bay Area, but we're talking about we can't even buy a house.
Right.
And like we can't even buy a 1-bedroom, let alone rent a 1-bedroom and have enough to serve. Nobody, dude, isn't that crazy that the people that own the most money in like engineers in Silicon Valley cannot afford to have a 1-bedroom apartment? to me, I think that's just outrageous. Yeah. If the person that's paid the most in the community cannot afford to have a one bedroom, what about?
But the problem is though, Kuda, that you're not the person that's paid most in the community. The person who's paid most in the community is Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and like all of their leadership team and Sheryl Sandberg, like in all of their leadership, like that took it.
Did you just call out Sheryl Sandberg right now?
I get like there's plenty of stuff that we can talk about Sheryl Sandberg and just like the whole modification, and this is like public information. Yeah. The whole modification of Facebook is all her idea. Like when she came in, she was the one who was in charge of like, how do we make Facebook profitable? That was like her job. And she did it. She's very successful. She's very, very talented and obviously insanely intelligent, right? But like that like it is what it is. That's like her job. Her job is to make, and she's accepted that, right, as her job. And she's accepted
her job
that
is to lean into the money.
Well, right. And there's like all sorts of things to be said about like money and about like how we like, you know, like again, like all these like cognitive dissonances, like between what we say our public goals and between what our actual goals are. There's just like all sorts of gaps there.
And I think it's quite expected to think that we were talking about the real self and the self that we want people to think we are.
Yeah.
That you're saying you're weary of doing that. You're weary of attaching yourself to this is who Pablo is when you know it's not really what it is, but it's just your marketing strategy. It's your PR.
Yeah. And that's the expectation though, right?
That's the expectation, to be like Facebook.
If you talk about how you're supposed to find a job, right?
Yeah.
It's all about marketing yourself. It's all about building a personal brand.
Yeah.
It's all about like finding a quick way to communicate who Pablo is so other people will like hire me.
Man, you just made me sad because I'm just thinking that's exactly what I did to get this job.
It's what we all have to do. And if you're bad at it, you don't have a job.
You don't have a job and you cannot leave. You cannot even have
and if no one's ever taught you how to do that, you're not going to have a job. And if you don't have a network of people who are willing to vouch for you and who are willing to engage, you're not going to have a job. And so again, we end up creating these spheres and spheres of influence and spheres of privilege, like levels to the privilege, right?
Yeah.
And again, you and I are very privileged people, right?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of ways in which the world has like has limited us, and ways in which the world like holds us down and creates unique obstacles for us. But at the end of the day, we're very privileged people, and even us, like we cannot like achieve that next level. And what does that say about?
What does that say?
The whole system, right?
What does it say about everybody else? Everybody else in the community you left in Miami, everybody else around those communities, people that like most likely didn't get a degree at Pomona College, you know, how does that look like for them? It's scary to think about. Thank you guys for joining us this week. And remember, vulnerability is strength and the birthplace for love, for ourselves and for others. Till next week, it's goodbye for now.